Good evening and welcome to this edition of Inside Kennedy Football, your weekly look inside the Kennedy Eagle football program. My name is Josh Powers. Coming up on this episode, we'll talk to the head coach, Kendrick Williams, about last week's game against Fridley. We'll talk to defensive line coach Scott Etzel. In the players segment, we'll catch up with Valiant Taylor and Isaac Grams. And then in the final segment, Coach Kendrick will rejoin me to talk about the first home game for Kennedy against St. Anthony this Friday at 7 o'clock. But before we look ahead, let's look back with the head coach, Kendrick Williams. First game of the season, but more importantly for you, or more notably for you, your first time as a head coach. What was that experience like from the bus ride all the way up to Fridley? You had to get there extra early for a weird start time to walk out on the field for the first time as a head coach of a football program.
Well, thanks, Josh, and thanks for having me today. You know, that was pretty crazy, kind of wild, Josh, last week. You know, I thought I would not get emotional, but as the Star Spangled Banner was playing, I just thought about all the things and all the mentors that I had before me, all the people who was really pushing for me in my corner to support me in this journey of mine as the head coach of Kennedy football. So I did get a little teary-eyed there. I don't know if anyone really caught me.
Our cameras were not there, so don't worry.
I did get a little bit. But, you know, I turned it around, got myself together, and we started that game.
What did you learn from your team week one? We'll start on the defensive side of the ball. What are some things, the positives that you want to take away from week one? Because I thought, all in all, I mean, people look at the score. I think it's a little deceiving the way that your defense played in game one.
It is deceiving, Josh, and I'm glad that you brought that up. You know, the best thing about that game, at the end of the first quarter, it was 0-0. You know, we both came out, first game of the season for everyone. I was really glad that our defensive guys, our new guys who are filling roles from departures of last year, they came in and filled those roles. We have our Isaac Grams at outside linebacker. We have our new defensive tackle in Valiant Taylor, you know, who really made plays last week. I got a couple sacks. Jake Houston is now playing defensive end for us. Did very well. And then, of course, our super freshman, Marquez Monroe. He just continues to make plays on the defensive side of the ball. Had a sack, led us to some tackles as well.
How about offensively? What can you learn from week one to try to improve the game quickly approaching here this week, about 3 days from now on Friday?
Well, the thing I learned offensively, Josh, is we have to figure out what type of football we want to play. I think we tried for the power game, and it didn't necessarily work against Fridley. Something we can get back on later on during the season. Something we're going to work on continually in practice. But part of being a new coaching staff is identifying ways that we can be successful on the offensive side of the ball. Defense can be so much easier at times. Offense is about establishing an identity and then going with that identity.
You had such a good defense last year, and we all know some of the players that contributed to that. A lot of those guys aren't here anymore, the Kofi Beckleys and the Joe Draves and Terrell Barber. But how were you able to reload with new guys and perform so well right out of the gate in week one?
Well, you know, it goes back to what our camp slogan is this year, Josh. And if you can see the back of my shirt, it simply says, you know, success is mental.
We can trust. We'll trust you. We can't see it, but we'll trust you.
Well, our slogan this year, success is mental. Being mentally strong, being mentally growth mindset. Understand that defense is an attitude. Understanding the way we play defense is with passion, emotion. Don't need a lot of skill to be able to go hit, Josh. Go be able to get it.
Was there anything that surprised you being the first time that you've been a head coach? We talked about that a little bit last week leading up to the game. Was there anything in the game that surprised you or maybe you weren't expecting that you had to deal with that maybe you hadn't had to deal with as an assistant coach?
You know, some of my loved ones told me I didn't yell enough. They told me they couldn't, Josh. They said I was too quiet. Believe that one, huh? So that's one thing I definitely want to improve upon, just being more engaged. Last week was more of an observation from a visual standpoint, observing guys, observing mindsets, physical body language. This year, I think I'll be much more into the game.
What about the way that you deal with officials versus like the way before? What kind of a coach are you? Are you a guy that's gonna let the official know maybe that you feel a certain way, or how do you approach that aspect?
Well, I understand that officials are part of the game, Josh. It's not a part that everyone likes, but I love. Because understanding what the official is just not going to get every call, number one. Understanding that. They're going to make some great calls. They're going to make bad calls. Sometimes it's in your favor. Sometimes it's not, Understanding that and having a relationship throughout the game with the official, especially this time, is going to be very key to getting calls in your favor. If you go out, you're never going to be successful.
You're going to be coming to Bloomington in the last segment, but you're going to be coming back home, Bloomington Stadium, for that one because it's your first game at home. What are you looking forward Friday night, coming home for the first time this year?
You know, by far, I'm looking for East Side pride. Looking for our Bloomington alumni that I've met so many times, whether it's at Applebee's or some other level. You know, I'm just really looking for those guys to come out and see a brand of football in support of our community and the businesses that have helped support us thus far.
Maybe a little bit about them, but what else do you want to say about Valiant Taylor and Isaac Grams? We're going to meet them here in just a few minutes.
Well, Valiant, I'll start with Valiant. Valiant's our team, kind of our team clown. You know, he brings the aggressive nature, but we got to let Valiant be Valiant. You know, he's a saxophone player, and those guys, I tell you. You know, and Isaac Grams is somebody who's been used to being a leader. You know, we picked him as a captain this year just based on some of his application process that we went through for captainship and just some of his ability to lead by example as well. Not just verbal, but someone that you can look at and say, I can model his behavior on the field and off the field in the classroom.
Well, we're looking forward to meeting them in just a couple of segments. And, of course, You'll be back in our last segment to preview the St. Anthony game at home on Friday night.
Thanks, John.
All right, coming up next, we'll talk to defensive line coach Scott Etzel when Inside Kennedy Football continues.
We will never fully understand what we've asked of you, or your families, asking you to put yourself in harm's way, to endure it all. But we do understand that it's our turn, our duty, to keep you secure for the rest of your life. Wounded Warrior Project long-term support programs help our most severely ill or injured veterans live independently, at no cost, for life, so that they might stand at ease. Join us at findwwp.org.
Welcome back to Inside Kennedy Football on BEC-TV. Year 6. Still hard for me to believe that it's year 6 of this show. Episode 2 of the 2019 season. Joined by a repeat customer to our program, defensive line coach Scott Etzel. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Josh. Glad to be here.
You came back for another appearance this season, so we must not have treated you that horribly the first time around.
Well, I got a text at 11:30 last night and saw it at 6:30 this morning, and we had a JV game today, so I said, I'm all in. So just threw another shirt car, and we're good to go.
Defensively, that was the highlight of week 1 against Fridley. From your standpoint, we talked a little bit to the head coach about it, but why were you guys able to be so successful with so many new players, specifically on the defensive line with some big departures from last year?
Well, I think a lot of it is just the scheme carried over. So everything we talked about last year and in the summer, even though there's new pieces, there's no new terminology. The scheme's the same. We're either a 3-4 or a 4-3. Coach Vetch is back. One of the reasons I came back is that 3 of us were going to be together again. And even though we lost those players you mentioned last year, I said if we can stay together on this side, and we'll transition with the new offensive coaches on the other side. So I think that's the biggest key, just the continuity.
We touched on this last year, but maybe for those who didn't catch last year's edition, just walk us through your credentials, so to speak. How did you come to know the game of football, history with the game, and then what ultimately led to, after you were done playing, what led you to be a
That's
coach?
way too long an answer, Josh. But I played college football at University of Northern Iowa in the early 80s, and then went on, finished my degree about 18 months later, and then my first teaching job was at Kennedy as a .8 tech ed teacher. Mike McKay was still here, and I got to spend about 10 years coaching with him. And Mike Barnes from Park Center was one of the head coaches too. And then took some time off, a bunch of carousel changes with our head coach. For 16 years, nobody asked me to coach again. I had my 2 kids, hung out with them through grade school. And then 2013, I kind of knew John Anderson. But he's like, hey, I know you've been out of it for a while. Any chance you want to consider coaching? He goes, I'm going on my honeymoon. I'll call you in 2 weeks. And so it led to that. And then Kendrick and I got to see each other just on the staff. But for the first 5 years, we were separated because offensive line and defense, and he just saw my ethic. And then last year, John asked me to move over because we needed someone there. So we gelled together, and I got to see his game planning and we were a pretty good team, and so I'm back for the transition and see where it goes from here.
Was it really that out of the blue? He just kind of called you after 16 years, or were there any kind of discussions?
No,
leading
not
up to
really.
that?
I mean, John and I had crossed paths because of track. We missed coaching throws at Kennedy together at different times, and I kind of knew who he was, and then hadn't really talked football, but was one of the first calls he made, and I said, well, John, it's been a long time. And he's like, hey, it's still blocking, tackling. Let's go see. And so it's been a good marriage, and it's led to this relationship with Kendrick, and we're going through this transition, and it's fun.
You went to Northern Iowa. Did you catch any of that Northern Iowa State game? Your former team nearly pulled off a big upset, maybe if not for a weird bounce of the ball.
I had
overtime.
it just watching it on my phone a little bit and saw it go through. See my ex-wife there, that's why I paid attention to it. But it was a game, and Mark Farley was a guy that I played with. He was a walk-on, became a scholarship athlete, grad assistant, has been the head coach there for a long time.
A lot of those FCS teams have performed so well. We obviously know what North Dakota State can do.
Yep.
I saw firsthand what South Dakota State can do last week, and Northern Iowa has been a top program for so long. Do you take pride in when those FCS schools go? And
it's not that big a jump. I mean, it's just a little bit, maybe a little smaller, not quite as fast as the big boys, a few less scholarships, but it's still very, very good football.
You got St. Anthony coming up. We'll talk to the head coach, Kendrick Williams, about this in our final episode, or final segment. But from your standpoint, defensively, it's another team that you haven't played historically over the last few years.
Right.
How challenging has that been from a game prep standpoint as you look ahead to these teams?
It's really interesting because we just have a little scrimmage tape, and we got their last week's game and against Providence. And so first impression for us was I was impressed by their offensive line. They seemed to come off the ball. Really did someone get moved back. A lot of double teams. A good slot receiver, number 15. I don't know the name. Coach would know his name. And then their running back, number 21, is phenomenal. Had a 99-yard kickoff return after fumbling the ball last week.
I saw that,
so it's going to be a lot about holding it against the double team, and when our linebackers get a chance to fill, that they fill. If we do that, we should have some success.
Well, Coach, we're so glad you're back coaching at Kennedy High School. Great to catch up with you as always, and who knows, maybe we'll have you back maybe next year on Inside Kennedy Football. But
all right.
Good luck the rest of the season, okay?
Thank you so much, Josh.
All right, that's defensive line coach Scott Etzel. Coming up, the player segment, we'll talk to a couple of defensive guys. Valiant Taylor and Isaac Grams join me next on Inside Kennedy Football. Back on Inside Kennedy Football, the Eagles have their first home game of the season against St. Anthony on Friday night. You can watch it live on BEC-TV, 7 o'clock start, or better yet, head on over to Bloomington Stadium and check out the Eagles and support them as they try to get victory number 1 on the year. A couple of the guys that are key factors in this year's team join me now. Isaac Grams, Valiant Taylor. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Isaac, we'll start with you because you're on my left. You always go left to right, right? So you were named a captain of this year's team. How did that process go, and what did it do you to be a captain?
So like in years past, they had it kind of the best players were the captains, and this year I think it's more of like who can rally our team and who can bring everyone together when times are tough. And so we had to go through a process of what discipline means to you and how all this stuff kind of matters and how we'll all fill in. And I just wrote on there whatever I would do with wrestling, and I guess it worked out.
What did it mean to you to be actually selected as a captain of this year's team?
It was great. It shows that the coaches have promise in me. Think I'm willing to lead this team, and hopefully I'm doing a good job.
Valiant, you have a unique story, so let's back up a little bit. you weren't a part of last year's football team. Walk us through what you were doing last year and why you're on the football team this year.
Last year, I was really making sure I was getting all my business taken care of so that I can come back and play this year, help out the team. Yeah.
What did you do in that year away from football?
A lot of band stuff, a lot of band-related stuff.
No, that's close to my heart because I'm also a fellow saxophone player. But so did you go to the football games with the marching band? Were you there?
I did. I was there a lot of the home games, yeah.
So what was that like for you, being with a football background, knowing that you wanted to get back out there and you were kind of watching the team from afar? Did that even maybe help you, kind of springboard you to make that leap again?
Yeah, I'd say emotional. It was emotional, to say the least. Watching it from the sidelines, it was sad, but it was also like motivation. Like, yeah, I really need to get back out there, and yeah.
What's your favorite song to play in the band?
Carry On My Wayward Son, for sure.
That's a great. We played that at the University of Minnesota marching band when I was a saxophone player. Good part there for us to kind of showcase our abilities. But Isaac, I want to get back to you because you factor predominantly in another sport at Kennedy. So talk about what you do on the wrestling mat.
You know, I think it helps my mental strength, knowing to be disciplined, to eat right, watch your weight, make sure you're always at your best. So this year, I guess this past year, I wrestled at 160, and I was fortunate enough to make it to state as a sophomore, which is pretty exciting. And then back in June, I was on Team Minnesota, Team Storm, and we drove out to Washington and won the national championship in freestyle and Greco, so that was pretty exciting.
Maybe the best, I would say, maybe the best accomplishment so far in sports?
Yeah, I've been on a few other like Team Minnesota teams, but I think the best we got would be like third, and that was when I was younger, so I guess it didn't really matter as much, but yeah, it was exciting.
We were talking off stage, and I'll ask you this question. It's kind of a weird question, but wrestlers are known for dropping weight quickly.
Oh, man.
Tell us about the most pounds you've ever dropped in a certain time period, and if you're maybe looking to shed a few pounds, give us some tips on how you did it.
Well, for one thing, I kind of lie to my parents about how much I need to lose so they won't freak out. So I tell them I got to lose like 3 pounds in a day. But there was one time in like 6th or 7th grade where I needed to cut down to a lower weight class that I wasn't prepared to go to. And in about 4 hours, I lost about 8 pounds. And that's just layers, having like 2 sweatpants on, tucked into my socks, a sweatshirt on, sleeping in a sweatshirt. And then that's just to get the water out, and then it's just super strict diet. It's really low carb. You have low energy, but you got to lose the weight somehow.
Speaking of wrestling, Valiant, you're also on the wrestling team.
Yes.
Talk about what weight class you wrestle at, and how do you think wrestling helps your football game?
I wrestle heavyweight, so it's a little different.
You're not looking to cut the pounds.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying.
yeah, that's correct. Yeah. I'd say a big thing with wrestling, it's a lot of mental strength along with physical. It really pushes you to be your absolute best, and that carries over on the football field, which is very helpful.
Question for each of you to answer. Week 1, defense was the highlight for you guys. So many new players, yourselves included in that mix, stepping up to fill the shoes of some guys who were great players here for Kennedy. How were you guys able to be so successful last Friday?
I think communication. So we had a lot of guys that obviously haven't played maybe much varsity, and then we have our freshman. So telling him, like, if they're in a certain formation, not to blitz, and even though coach called one, and them listening was super helpful.
How about you, Valiant?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. On defense, the biggest thing is communication and making sure we all know what we're doing and do it. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to be communicating to you guys right now because it's our trivia segment. Best 2 out of 3 gets bragging rights for the entire season. So this is how it's going to work. I'm going to ask you guys a question that has to do with Kennedy High School, and then a series of multiple choice questions. If you think you know the answer at any time, you can buzz in by saying your name. Best 2 out of 3 wins. So here we go. What is the name of the baseball field the baseball team plays at Kennedy? Is it Kent Herbeck Field, Dred Scott Field, the Toro Coliseum, or Red Hat Field?
Valiant, Kent Herbeck Field.
No, it is not Kent Field. I'll let you, Isaac.
Wait, what were the options again?
Red Haddocks Field, Dred Scott.
Haddocks?
Red Haddocks Field is correct. It's very near Kent Herbeck Fields, but they play at Red Haddocks. So Isaac leads 1-0. What school opened first? Was it Lakeville South, Kennedy, Jefferson or East Ridge? What high school opened first?
Isaac, Kennedy.
Kennedy opened first out of all those schools. Man. So there you go. You swept it clean sweep, 2-0. Okay. Isaac is our winner. Guys, thanks a lot for joining us. Best of luck as we continue the season, and we'll see you guys on Friday night, okay?
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right, the head coach, Kendrick Williams, joins me next to preview the home opener against St. Anthony coming up on Inside Kennedy Football.
Okay, let's set the facts straight. Almost a quarter of car crashes involve cell phones. When you text and drive, you look away at least 5 seconds. At 55 miles per hour, that's the length of a football field. Time out. It's illegal in 39 states to text and drive, but you're in danger everywhere when you don't focus. So keep your eyes on the road and arrive alive. No text, no wrecks. So don't text and drive.
Final segment of this week's show. Kennedy will be at home for the first time on Friday as they take on St. Anthony. To talk about that one, head coach Kendrick Williams. You get to be at home. You don't have to travel up to Fridley at, I don't know when you left, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, battling rush hour. You get a nice short commute to Bloomington Stadium on Friday night. What is that going to be like to be at home? We talked about it a little bit, but in terms of that game day preparation, it has to be a lot easier than last week.
What it is, last week we had meetings at like 3 o'clock, so that would be like a school day, rushing down to the locker room to get your meetings, get dressed, and get out the door. You know, we did end up leaving last week early, and I'd be so appreciative that we don't have to do that this week. Sat in traffic for about an hour and 20 minutes last Thursday, so, you know, this minute we have a 15-minute ride over to the stadium. Really appreciative of that convenience.
St. Anthony, a team, obviously you got a new schedule this year, new opponents, new district. What do you know about St. Anthony? I saw that 99-yard kickoff return. It maybe didn't start out well for that young man, but he sure did a heck of a job once he got hold of the ball. But it sounds like they got some playmakers that can really bust things open.
That's Murray. You know, the thing about that at St. Anthony, they do have some athletes over there. They'll be able to stop him. He is a state track runner. He's been real good at the running back position. A lot of power. When you see him run, he brings the power a lot. So we're going to have to really focus on our tackling, breakdown tackling, things like that, Josh, and really being a little bit more aggressive that way defensively.
First day of school today for my daughter, for Kennedy as well. So what is that like now that classes are back into session? How does that factor into what you do to prepare for a game every week?
Well, you know that was huge because a lot of the kids were tired, and then we had a junior varsity game today as well, Josh. So a lot of busy today. But I'm glad we did get it over with. We're through that now. We have no excuses why we can't be better tomorrow, and come and learn some new things to get ready to attack with this Friday.
You give that extra day to prepare between week 1 and 2. How important is that, especially going against a team that now you weren't familiar with, but now you do have some game film on them from this year, from their first game?
You know, that's the great thing about it. You know, film is everything. Film is everything. And on Fridley, we were kind of just in the loop. We didn't understand what they were doing. We didn't really know. However, now that we have film on St. Anthony from their game last week against Providence Academy, you know, we're able to scheme for some things, really go after some things, focus on some things that we want to shut down. They have some really good skilled players over there. Last year, St. Anthony was a section, you know, finalist in their area. They went, I believe, regular season, they went 9-2, I believe. So they were a good football program. A lot of those kids did come back. They're running backers from last year. They're stud receiver, outside linebacker from last year. So they have some pieces. They're tight end, Mr. King, from last year. So they have some things this year, you know, from their team last year that I'm sure they're going to try to capitalize off of.
Question maybe off the beaten path here a little bit. What did Kendrick Williams do to enjoy his Labor Day weekend? What were you up to all Labor Day? Were you in the film room? Did you get a chance to get out at all?
You know, Josh, I'll be honest, I was in the film room. My family and those guys, they got a chance to enjoy the state fair. We actually had to practice on Labor Day. So, you know, our frustration of not scoring last week has been a major focus these first 2 days of practice this week. And that's what I was doing. I was looking at ways that we can attack St. Anthony and be successful getting into the end zone this week.
I asked Coach Carlson this in the Jefferson show, but they always say teams make the biggest improvement from week 1 to week 2, and Coach Carlson wanted that to be the case, and I'm sure you want that to be the case too. And for that to be the case for this year's team, what are some things that you want to see on the football field on Friday to make that happen?
You know, Josh, in practice, we talk about our wants versus needs. This is a need. We need to show better improvement this week on the offensive side of the ball. In order to make that happen, we've simplified some things. We have a first-year quarterback in Jesse Falk. He is also one of our captains. But Jesse just needs a little shorter things. So we've worked on a way to simplify the offensive game plan. And we've also looked for little weaknesses that St. Anthony has shown on film. And we're going to try to attack those weaknesses a little bit more this week.
I know you want all the fans to come out and support the team. I know that's critical for what you want to do. For those that are going to venture out on Friday to see you guys take on St. Anthony, what kind of a football team are they going to rally behind and cheer on to victory?
You know, one thing about it is our energy. They say a team is like their head coach. Well, I'm energy. And I hope it's contagious this week. I tell you that much when we come out those stands over at Bloomington Stadium. When we get ready to kick off at 7 o'clock Friday night, the fans will understand that we need their support. We need them to keep us in the game. You know, not only from a mental standpoint, from an energy, a celebration standpoint, you know, but we have to give them something to celebrate about too, Josh. It goes both ways. So we have a phrase in our program called win the crowd. We have to win the crowd this week.
Well, I'm ready to go. I hope they're ready to go and come out in full force. Coach, best of luck on Friday. We'll be there. We'll talk to you then, and we'll see you, of course, next week as well on another edition of Inside Kennedy Football.
Thanks for having me today, Josh. I just again want to thank our community sponsors for going and supporting the Eagles. Go Eagles.
All right, that's head coach Kendrick Williams. Again, first home game for Kennedy. St. Anthony, the opponent, 7 o'clock on BEC-TV. Better yet, get on out to Bloomington Stadium. Cheer on the Eagles on Friday night. That'll wrap up this edition of Inside Kennedy Football. For our entire crew, this is Josh Powers saying goodnight from our studios.